I've lived in New Jersey my entire life, and I know lots of interesting people. Artists, musicians, actors, business owners, and politicians. So my goal is to introduce some of the most interesting people who have ties to New Jersey. Either they live here, they work here, they went to school here, whatever tie I can think of. And yeah, maybe they're not so famous, even in New Jersey. But I'm going to change that because I'm Lucille Losapio, and this is Not So Famous in New Jersey. Maybe you think that African American history or the African American history makers aren't really that important. But I'm here to tell you, with the second half of my interview with Julieanna Richardson, who has been compiling an archive of African American history, that there are many, many people that have contributed to American history that you've never heard of. And this project has been giving identity and voice to those who have been major contributors to the American story. They just happen to be Black Americans. We discuss everything from the Clotilda, which was the last slave ship to land in America, to Bridgerton, and black and white relations, as well as integration. Lots of interesting stories, lots of interesting conversation. We begin where we left off.
I remember I often tell this story about Colonel Thompson, who I was going to his interview and thinking in the early days, why am I interviewing Colonel Thompson?
And who is Colonel Thompson?
Colonel Thompson was a Tuskegee Airman, but what I didn't know was that he was the chief documentarian for the Tuskegee Airmen, and he had prepared for me for 4 days. And he sits me down and asks me, do I know about the Golden 13? No, Colonel Thompson, I've never heard of the Golden 13. He said, well, they were the Navy's version of the Tuskegee Airmen. And 4 left living in this country, and 1 lives upstairs, and he wants to talk to you. And it was at that point, and then I often tell the story that I'm sitting next to General Powell, and I am pitching him about an interview. Yeah. And then he says about the Montfort Point Marines.
What were they called? The Montfort
Point Marines. So you're doing just like I did that night with General Powell. He actually wrote it out for me. I kept saying, what is it? Montfort Point. And so I'm proud to say that we interviewed Tuskegee Airmen.
So did you interview Colin Powell?
Yes, we did.
How about Barack Obama?
We did. We interviewed Barack Obama when he is the Illinois state senator. And what's surprising is he's very consistent to the person he is today. Yeah. So it's surprising. We got a $2.3 million grant to interview Black scientists. And it was just delightful.
Yeah. I'm sure Neil deGrasse Tyson.
For people who were, no, Neil deGrasse Tyson did not want to interview with a project where people identified as African American. I have an issue with Neil deGrasse Tyson. The science centers, they literally knew George Washington Carver and Neil deGrasse Tyson with almost nothing in between. But, we interviewed Warren Washington, who invented the computer models to predict weather patterns. And he's had the highest award given in science.
I love the story. What was the movie about the computers in NASA?
Right. That's Hidden Figures. Right. And we interviewed Katherine Johnson. Ooh. We interviewed her. And I was shocked, because I'm like, there was a movie about this subject because I could see myself pitching and everybody just yawning, and they did such a wonderful job on Hidden Figures.
Now, I wonder, have you watched the show Bridgerton?
I love Bridgerton.
I'm watching the show and I'm going, oh, there are Black people. Okay. But they're being treated the same as everybody. Mm-hmm. And the book wasn't written that way. That was was something that they did because they wanted to just open up the casting. And then the Queen Charlotte series, how they explain how it happened. I just love that. It's like, I wish everybody would watch that.
Right. Queen Charlotte is actually a true person.
King George's wife.
That's right. And supposedly having African. So that's why I'm saying there's so much we don't know. Mm-hmm. And that's what I find exciting, because I think we're living at a point that we can get beyond the fictionalized account to truer.
How much of an impact do you think shows like The Watchmen and Lovecraft Country have had on Americans' knowledge about Black history in the country?
I think it has helped. I just think there's so much more.
Mhm.
Wasn't that Tulsa?
Yes.
I thought they were, well done. And I start to see things like Bridgerton. I mean, I remember literally as someone who has the theater
Yeah.
background, and I'm like, oh my God, the colors and the clothing I mean, it was just like mind boggling. And I think that that's helpful. I would like for our project to be identified with things that are historically accurate as much as you can have accuracy. And I do want to say that period of time, because you always see in different paintings, a little black person to the side, around, and you don't have context for it. So I think things were a little more diverse, but not always, but more diverse than what has always been pictured or represented.
I'm going to get a little more personal, and I'm going to ask you, when was the last time you cried in front of another person, and why did you cry?
Oh, I've been crying in interviews. Oh. I was interviewing Dr. Reverend Marvin McMickle, and he's in Cleveland. He was the pastor there, and he and Calvin Butts, he was the last head of Abyssinia Baptist Church. When he was talking, I just was taken back to growing up in the Black church. And the Black church was totally foundational for the Black community. I just cried because the church of today is not the church of my childhood, where we were taught our manners. It was a true community where everybody came together, and entertainers come out of the church, and musicians come out of the church, and business leaders and civic leaders, and everybody comes out of that church. And it's the place where Black people had dignity. There's nothing like a Black usher. They ran those, the seating like military, and so these were often people working in menial jobs, or they were working in service or as domestics. But on that Sunday, they had real positions. I miss that church. The church of the day, we have the mega church. I don't know, it's just not this. And I'm not casting aspersions, but I cried for the loss of that. I really want, both inside and outside the Black community, I want them to have the richness of the experience I've had the last 24 years. Because the fact that we still struggle, like,
oh no, you have the advantages now. You've got it easier than white people. When I hear people say that,
and it's so not true. And so I look at this because I just would like people, this is what I really now understand. Integration will never, ever work in the United States unless we can have our real stories emerge.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to integrate unless you are just off the beaten path or whatever. No one wants to integrate with something less than. No one.
The worst thing, I think, is when Black people think that they're less than. That's
right.
The biggest sadness.
Well, you know what? That is absolutely the case. And most Black people, they thought the white community was greater than. But it is not that story out here. It's not greater or less than, but the beauty of the American experience that is the melting pot.
Yeah.
That's what I want to get to, because you just you can't have the pot melting unless you recognize all the pots.
Right.
Can't have the melting pot unless you have all the ingredients in the pot.
I feel like I have the advantage. When I grew up, same time as you, my mother would always say, there's no difference between Black and white except the color of the skin. And that was drilled into us as kids.
But look, how could your mother have been so wonderful?
And her father was, she grew up in Jersey City, and her father was the same way, my grandfather. So that was the way she was brought up.
But see, that is very rare in our United States. And it's just, the thing is that maybe some of it is just human beings, like you look different than I do.
Everybody has to have an enemy, yeah.
Right. So, but for your parents and your grandparents, thank you, because it's not that it hasn't existed, but just very much on the minorities.
Yeah. Changing the subject slightly, The story of the Clotilda is really a fascinating story. And I wonder if you've been able to speak with anyone associated with it, even peripherally, from, maybe the descendants of the 30 freed Africans that were on the Clotilda, or with current
No,
descendants in Africatown. No?
no,
You have any plans
no.
to try to speak to any of them?
I mean, I would like to, I don't know if I've come across anyone who has said that. There are some old Black families that exist. I just was at Monticello and speaking, with some of those descendant families. That's interesting because he kept his mixed progeny close, whether he treated them, but he kept them close.
Yeah.
Where a lot of times the wife was like, get those bastard kids out of here. I don't want to be
You're
seen.
reminding me that my husband cheated on me.
was cheated, right. And that's the other thing. You talk about surprise, because I'd not gone to Monticello and I did not know the proximity of Washington and Madison. I mean, they were all neighbors. And everybody's mixed up like gumbo, whether they acknowledge or not. I mean, they had so many like bastard children running around that were Black, had half Black. And so I think of it in that way. But your question again?
The descendants from the Clotilda, the ones that live in Africa.
No, we haven't. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I don't remember anyone. I'd have to, but I should actually look into because I'm not the only one. I'm wondering if I look to see if those have come up. Now, who's interesting? Alexis Herman, who grew up in Mobile, Alabama, talks about the Clotilda. She became Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. So she's talking about it. So I'm not sure. We moved back to Mobile because our aunt lived on Bay Bridge. And when we walked down this path, there was a lady that lived on the right side that was a descendant of Kojo Lewis, of the African slaves. People in the collection talking about Africatown.
Yeah, because the people that lived in Africatown didn't want to associate with the formerly enslaved people, because
that's right.
It was like, we're better than them. We weren't slaves, for very long at least,
No, I have what we have in our archive are references, but I don't have anyone saying that they wait. You know what? Now, I want to say that Bishop Howes, who we interviewed, they're saying he's from that lineage.
Oh.
That we have someone who's from that lineage.
You learn something new every day.
You do.
Are you the only one who does the interviews?
Oh, no.
You'd be really busy.
I mean, I'm doing more now, but no, I've done out of the 3,700, I've done about 600, but that's over 24 years. So no.
I know that there've been some really fascinating stories, and I understand that there is a plan to maybe create or produce a documentary or documentaries.
I'm very interested in being an archive that produces out of its content. We had, as fundraisers, used to do a PBS taping called An Evening With. But now we have, this archive, and I just think that it will help if we can produce out of the content. I think we're hoping to be idea generators. I mean, a lot of people, because we've interviewed them, have gone back and started to learn more about their family history. Yeah. So we don't really care to be the only. We just want to be, in a lot of respects, an instigator, a source, a primary source for this history.
So if you were given the choice to interview anyone, alive or deceased, who would you want to interview?
Well, we lost interviews. Coretta Scott King, because she never wrote her biography.
She didn't.
No, never successfully. Ray Charles, because we lost him. We never got to do him. There's so many, that we didn't get to do. James Baldwin, but James Baldwin, he left his papers, and I saw a document there, I'm Not Your Negro, but there was another well-done documentary that they had him even in his underwear. He was well documented. So if I could go, maybe a better question for me would be, if I could go back to a period of time.
Right.
I would like to go back to Reconstruction. because I just want to know what the process was, because we talk about Lincoln freed the slaves. Well, we already know that Juneteenth is because the slaves in Texas didn't know they were free.
Yeah.
But how do you move from enslavement to this whole area of Reconstruction and to building, you're working? How do you establish your own homestead? So I think that would be, because we just don't know enough about it.
Yeah. I just heard recently about, and I didn't listen to the entire story on NPR, but it was about the 40 acres and a mule, that actually people did get that, but there were so many strings attached.
But that's why I'm saying the things that, and I really hope, I believe that there will be a lot coming out of our collection and the other efforts that are out there that will change the narrative and help really instigate the promulgation of other lost American stories. Because, since then, because I thought, oh my God, everybody knows their history except Black people. And then I find that lots of people don't know their history. And that, the richness of this country, because every time I go outside the United States, I love the United States more, even in its very challenged period we're in now, because it was a wonderful experiment. It's never realized its mission, and the potential, and the Black community still struggles for acceptance and integration. And we really, in many ways, the country was built on our backs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Without slavery.
Without slavery, there would not. And I'm fascinated with the northern states and their involvement. Like when I went to Lewiston, Maine, where Bates College is located, I realized that there was cotton manufacturers, they were the largest cotton manufacturers. And I'm like, who were the Southern, who were they working for? Yeah. And no one could tell me. And I just found that, totally fascinating. So we don't know all the intersections. Yeah.
So Julieanna, is there anything that you personally have dreamed of doing for a long time? And why haven't you done it?
Okay. So for me, who started this project in the mid-40s, I really want to be successful with it. And what does success mean? That I'm able to leave an institution that will live way beyond me. I want the collection to be relevant for the child who's not born. I'm going to go to my grave a very happy person and fulfilled, because we have content that can't be found any other place. And I'm giving that identity and voice to people who will be long gone, but were major contributors to society. Yeah. In terms of my own, what I have not done, I really love traveling, beyond, outside the United States. So I don't think I'll ever go to every country in the world. I don't know. I think from time to time, I'd like to get back into a theater class, like a scene study class, because that's where I was, as a young person, to disappear into the world of others. Let me tell you what skills I use that come from theater. And that is just character development, because you really are trying to understand the character that you're portraying. So, I think that I would put it there.
So here's my last question. I really enjoyed talking with you. And when I come to Chicago, because my best friend from college lives in Chicago, I'm going to look you up and we're going to go out together.
I would love that. I would love that.
If you were to die this evening with no opportunity to communicate with anyone, what would you most regret not having told someone?
I don't know, not would say it having told someone, but I would regret for the people who don't know me, because I was so driven, that the little girl was still in search of her identity and not wanting other little people to be in search of theirs. That's what I would say.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you fit me in your calendar.
Thanks a lot, Lucille. Thank you.
Where else can you hear scintillating conversations with interesting people with ties to New Jersey, except for here? You can't, and that's why you should subscribe and listen to every episode. I'm Lucille Osapio, and this is Not So Famous in New Jersey.